Sanskrit word karma means action, and action is Mars, meaning Mars is the one who creates all the karma. Every action has its consequence, and the consequence is represented by Saturn. So that means that every Saturn is just an old Mars. Just as the Mars, as the natural ruler of the first house or the sign of Aries, exalts in the 10th sign, or the sign of Capricorn, ruled by Saturn, Mars becomes Saturn. And when we look the karmic astrology chart, we always see the Saturn as a Mars in a previous life, in order to understand all the consequences that we are seeing now through that Saturn. So we have different kind of Saturn's karma. Some people have a Saturn that is very challenged and actually makes some difficulties to them, and this is general circumstances, situations they have. Some other people have Saturn that basically supports them more than actually making challenges. So that's again the result of certain Mars action, the certain actions that we had. In order to get the pure understanding and the story, just replace Saturn with the Mars. Wherever we see Saturn, just replace it with the Mars, and then read the story of actions. If we have Saturn challenge with the Sun, that means that in a previous life we did the action toward the Sun that was challenging. So we actually made some action toward some person of authority or father or someone. So that was action that we made. Depending on the quality of the sign it is, we'll see two different kind of karmas we actually created. If it was a male sign and Mars is in the male sign, that would represent the action that we actually performed toward that. But if it was a female sign, that's how we experienced someone else's authority. So if the person was very authoritarian toward us, we experienced, oh yeah, that's how it is, I'm aggressive, but I have to defend. It was more like in the area of defending. Action is action. So if we were creating the strong defense just because we experienced like that, then we receive the Saturn in a female sign challenged by the Sun. If it is a story with the Moon, Saturn Moon, so typically these people would create some challenges toward the special female figure or general people, sometimes toward the nations. There would be like a fight or some kind of emotional reactions. It could be also karma with the mother, so we can also see these two things. And whatever we do not like or reject because we feel like this is how we feel and we just maintain that feeling, yeah, this is our reality, it becomes again reality that we have. Again, if it was in a male sign, that was much stronger action than if it was in a female sign. We experienced someone else's action toward us who was in the form of mother or form of other people who are not fair toward us and like this. So that's kind of a thing how it goes. Usually it means that if it is in a female sign, Saturn, the origin of that Saturn was even the life before of some other life, because we typically create the Saturn karma like we perform certain action. And then, through many lifetimes, we come to different situations. We experience other people being toward us like this, and that's when we actually earn Saturn in a female sign. And then how we actually experience that. If we experience that, oh, that was not fair, what we experienced, that's not nice, okay, then it stays that way. But typically, all the karma with Saturn starts with a male signs. Male sign and Saturn, it used to be a Mars in previous life, it's the karma creator. And now we see the chain of lives as different consequences that we are experiencing. Of course, if we have like a very stable aspect, harmonious one, we don't call that karma, like in a negative form of it. We call that the gift that we receive from Saturn that will provide us stability, building, because with those kind of actions we build. Anywhere we have a good Saturn means we are good builders. And in time we will develop something, we will build something, just because our actions in the previous life were more constructive, more toward what I want to build, not like what I don't want. There are many people who know much more what they do not want, and then they fight against that, and that's how they receive the consequence. So it is important that we actually direct our action much more in a positive way. What do we want? And to continue with that in order to receive a good Saturn in our karmic developments, let's say. If we have a Saturn challenge with Mercury, that means that this is the karma of words, of communication, usually with siblings, brothers, etc. We had some issues with that. We were very angry. We would say something which was very negative, very challenging, and these words are now echoing through time, and we receive bad news, negative things like depressive feelings sometimes, like many worries and all that. People do have that quality. This is just the memory. Their soul brings them through the actions they perform. People have a tendency to say negative words, to exaggerate because they experience something, and in that level, this is the way how we create. So this is also conscious decisions we made in a previous life that were challenging. And by these decisions, now we receive a very specific consequence. That's a Saturn Mercury. It can be in different, manifested in different areas of life, but this is the kind of karma that can manifest in this life in relationship, communication, even in traffic or any other kind of decision-making situations where people can make a wrong decision. Even again in this life, just because they're too feared or whatever, so they somehow choose to make a different reaction to certain situations. And if we have a Venus with a Saturn, so that means literally it was a Mars with the Saturn in previous lives. That's the karma of jealousy, of fight with the person we love, or relationship that would be very stressed. Nowadays, when we want to experience the love, it can be with postponings, not easy to achieve, so it is all blocked. This is just because a part of us, which is typically action part of us in some other life, it could have been a man who was abusing certain women, and now if we are in a female incarnation in this life, it can be very challenging because this is direct consequence what the person was doing in a love relationship. Very interesting situation is if we have a challenge aspect between Mars and Saturn, because that's like Mars with the Mars, and that's like a karmic knot. We see that as a very tense energy. It is the karmic energy that continue. We are literally fighting with who we were, but usually on the opposite side. We are just changing the sides, and now we have both of these. And this is typical karmic fight, but with the soul who just changed two different sides, because all the energy that we put in Mars previous time is nowadays a Saturn, and now we have a Mars again. It usually represents us because it is a more personal planet, so we typically be on the opposite side. It can happen that we still continue doing the same thing we did previous time, especially if the person is Capricorn rising, meaning the Saturn represents the person. So in that case, person would even continue the very same action it was in the previous life. If you have a Saturn-Jupiter square, previous life it was like a Mars-Jupiter challenge. Fight against the law in some cases, or fight against the people who are in a high position, or educated people, or wealthy people, or being very negative toward them. So the consequence in this life is, if the person was lawless in the previous life, in this life, it can experience losing some wealth or something the person has just as a result of what the person did previous time. If the person was fighting against people in power, or people who are wealthy or educated, similar consequence is happening now. Person cannot finish his education degree, cannot get that, this is one thing, or will have financial troubles, etc. So this is just like a mirroring. Saturn is actually mirroring our previous Mars. If you have Saturn challenge with Uranus, that's action related mostly with the mundane effects, so in the mundane karma. It was like Mars-Uranus, typically in revolutionary fights. So people would be part of a broader group, a bigger group of people who would fight against something, but they would all exaggerate in many things. So exaggerations brings challenging aspects. We face them in situations in general life. We get certain life situations in this life that are not so personal. They are just like circumstances that are happening. If you want to see consequence in a more precise way. We just need to check the house where these Saturn or Uranus are, what they represent, and where the results might be. But this is by the very nature something caused by the mundane effects. Similar thing is with Saturn and Neptune. Saturn and Neptune is also like Mars Neptune in the previous lives. It was a karma of people who do deceiving actions or using a lot of alcohol or drugs or some things. They were not very honest with that. So in this life we can get certain circumstances related to maybe being abused by people who are using certain substances, or having a father who is not very reliable, or like this. So these kind of things that actually do not give us stability are here just because our actions in the previous life were not very stable but rather deceiving. With Saturn-Pluto action, it is like a Mars-Pluto in a previous life. So that's a war. It's typically a greater participation in a greater war, in a hate, so many things that people actually develop there. Nowadays it stays and wait till the time for something that comes, and then it just triggers that deeper rooted memory that is earned through some wars or something, and then it can transform a person through these circumstances that one goes there. But whenever we check the Saturn's karma, we are aware that we are actually checking the mirror of our own action. That's the most important thing. And some people have a stronger Saturn karma than the other. It's not only the connection with the previous life memories coming from Saturn, but one part of our karmic links that we have with previous life is coming through Saturn.